What's up everyone and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Michael Chandler sends a message to Charles Oliveira. The last time Michael Chandler and Charles Oliveira threw down, Chandler was 34 and was fresh off his first victory with the UFC. Even though Iron Mike is 4 years older now and has been off for just over 2 years, he believes that he wasn't where he needed to be the first time the two fought. And before we continue, make sure to leave a like on the video to help support the channel. In an interview with the New York Post Sports this week, he explained that he's grown as a fighter since the first time he and Oliveira fought. I had almost no time to really process and build and grow. I'm 38 years old and I was 34 back then, but I'm still growing. We're all still growing as human beings, and I just wasn't where I needed to be. I went in there very confident. I put in a great training camp, but I went out there to try to kill Charles Oliveira in the first second of the first round. 10 aided him in the first round and I just wasn't able to keep that pace. I made a bad decision, put myself in some bad spots, I wasn't fighting to the best of my ability. And I've since fixed all those things, mainly mentally and spiritually, and I just think it's going to be a masterful performance. And I think I'm going to surgically and systematically break this man down until he looks for the exit sign. And I'm going to go out there and I'm going to finish, and I'm going to get my hand raised. And what did go right is he felt my power, he felt my tenacity, he felt my speed, he felt my strength, he felt my size, he felt my presence. Heading into the bout, both fighters know that a win could put them next in line for a crack at the winner of the upcoming title fight between Islam Makhachev and Arman Tsarukyan, which is expected to happen in January. With Chandler closing in on 40 and Oliveira turning 35 last month, the stakes couldn't be higher for the two contenders. Shavkhat Rakhmonov breaks silence on UFC 310. Since Belal Muhammad was forced out of his upcoming fight with Shavkhat Rakhmonov, there's been no word yet on what the UFC has planned for the Nomad. On one hand, the UFC could push the scheduled fight back a few months to the new year until Muhammad is back at full strength. But on the other hand, the UFC could have Rakhmonov stay on the card and fight for an interim title. During the Ariel Helwani show this week, Rakhmonov spoke through a translator while breaking a silence on the situation. I don't believe it's going to be 6 weeks. To be honest, I believe Jack Dell had the same problem with infection and he's still not back, so it can take a while, and Belal don't need to be greedy. If I become an interim champ, he's still going to have a belt too, and it's going to be champ versus champ, even bigger fight. He also weighed in on the bone infection that forced the champion to pull out, saying that he's heard the champion is already progressing in his recovery. From what I heard and what I know, he got those injuries even earlier, before it went public. Because I hear him train already recently, and maybe he just posted his picture recently, but the problem occurred even earlier, so I think he was able to fight on December 7th, but he wasn't sure, and just being extra careful. Even though the champion is out, Rakhmonov still wants to fight in Las Vegas. During the show, he called out Kamaru Usman for an interim title fight with his manager, saying that their team is negotiating with the UFC in hopes of getting the Nomad a short notice opponent so he can stay on the card. As MMA reporter Marcel Dorf pointed out, considering the co-main event, it makes sense for the UFC to book a fight between Rakhmonov and Usman. It's most likely the only fight that makes sense for Shavkhat to headline UFC 310, the fight with former champion Kamaru Usman. I personally wouldn't mind Pantoja versus Kai to headline, but don't think the UFC takes that gamble. Think Kai hasn't made 125 since 2017. Think he makes weight, but it's a pay-per-view, gotta be sure. Hope Shavkhat stays on 310. Whenever the UFC does figure out how they're gonna play things out, expect Dana White to go live to break the news. Dustin Poirier accepts Max Holloway fight? Ariel Helwani is ready for the UFC to retire the BMF belt, but it seems like lately there's been tons of talk about a 4-man BMF tournament. With the fighters on board and Dana White interested, it sounds like the BMF belt is here to stay. After losing to Ilia Topuria in Abu Dhabi, Max Holloway announced that he was done fighting at 145 and would be making the move up to 155 for good. Immediately, one fan called for a BMF title fight between Holloway and Poirier for the Diamond send-off. Poirier then responded with, "Last dance." Even if the UFC does not wind up having Justin Gaethje and Dan Hooker fight as the other half of a 4-man BMF tournament, a trilogy fight between Poirier and Holloway could wind up being one of the best fights of the year. The big question, of course, would be when the fight would take place. According to Holloway, he's targeting a return this summer at International Fight Week, which could time pretty well for Poirier, so he could take some time off to enjoy the holidays with his family before jumping into the swing of a full camp. Dana White's production team gets called out for UFC video. Dana White has been taking some verbal shots at Francis Ngannou over the past few weeks, saying that he wanted to cut the Predator after his back-to-back losses before winning the title, and that he thinks Ngannou is just pretending to be a good guy. Given that, many members of the MMA world were quick to notice that Dana White's production team happened to leave Ngannou out of a video with the top 100 knockouts from the Apex. Knockouts like Corey Sandhagen's flying knee against Frankie Edgar and Khamzat Chimaev's one-hitter-quitter against Gerald Meerschaert were indeed included, but Ngannou's knockout win over Stipe Miocic wasn't in there. This, of course, isn't the first time Dana White's quote-unquote rockstar production team has excluded Ngannou from a video. The crew also removed part of a quote from Israel Adesanya where he referenced Ngannou from one of the UFC's Fight Week videos this summer. At the time, after Izzy got mad at the UFC for trying to erase Ngannou, Dana said that someone from the production team made the call to exclude Ngannou, thinking that it was the right call. He also said that he called Izzy to apologize for the situation and accepted blame because he felt like comments he makes publicly make it hard on the production team. Given that this is the second time Ngannou has been noticeably absent from UFC content, the MMA world doesn't seem too happy. Stipe Miocic talks about retirement rumors and response to critics. Don't expect Stipe Miocic to make any big announcements leading up to his fight with Jon Jones. Even though a big chunk of the MMA world is expecting Miocic and Jones to both retire, win, or lose next weekend, the former champion said in an interview with MMA Fighting this week that he looks at every fight like it could be his last. I think every fight, I'm always preparing for my last one. I always thought about retiring after my first UFC fight. I say that all the time. Who wants to get beat up for 10 weeks, 12 weeks, come back and do it again? I love what I do and it's fun. So we'll see. But right now, my task at hand is Jon. That's all I care about. That's what I'm thinking about. Miocic also responded to his critics heading into the bout, saying that it was the UFC's decision to let him fight Jon Jones rather than having Jones fight Tom Aspinall in a unification bout. I just wanted to fight Jon. I mean, that's always wanted to do, and don't get me wrong, Aspinall, he's a great fighter, but I just want to fight Jon Jones. It wasn't my choice. It's the fight I wanted. UFC gave it to me. They didn't have to. They gave it to me. Even though typically a fighter in Miocic's position would have been offered the chance to fight for the interim belt when Jones pulled out of their original fight, the magnitude of a Jones-Miocic fight was so great that the UFC let Miocic hold on to the #1 contender spot while making an interim title on the side. The big question now is whether the winner of the Jones-Miocic fight sticks around for a title unifier with Tom Aspinall, or whether he winds up getting promoted to undisputed champ. UFC updates. Ahead of the 100th event at the Apex this weekend, let's look at today's UFC updates, starting with a featherweight fight between Nate Landwehr and Do Ho Choi. The two fan favorites will throw down at the UFC 310 card on December 7th, with both fighters looking to pick up their second victories in a row. Landwehr's last win was a first-round knockout over Jamal Emmers back in March. On the other side, Choi's last win was a second-round knockout against Bill Algeo over the summer. We also have news about the return of Jorge Masvidal. Masvidal said earlier this year, after losing to Nate Diaz, that he wanted to return to the UFC, but Dana White made it sound like the UFC wasn't going to bring him back. This week, Masvidal signed with Ali Abdelaziz and Dominance MMA to hopefully get back into the UFC given the UFC's good relationship with Abdelaziz. Abdelaziz was quoted by MMA Fighting's Damon Martin as saying that it's an honor to work with Masvidal and these guys are real men. This is the type of people I want to work with. So far, no word yet on whether the UFC plans to bring Masvidal back after the management change. We also have some news in the lightweight division. According to a post on the Nurmagomedov MMA School's Instagram page, Islam Makhachev and Arman Tsarukyan will fight in January at the UFC 311 card in LA. But so far, the UFC has not confirmed the news yet. Song Yadong fires back at Sean Strickland's comments. While Sean Strickland and MMA reporter Helen Yi have a good relationship, and Yi interviews the former champ pretty often, he often made some controversial comments about China during one of their latest interviews. This week, Song Yadong fired back during his own interview with Helen Yi, where he said via translator that he believes Strickland's comments and uninformed perspective stem from never having been to China. I heard him say a lot of negativity about Chinese people. However, I don't think he's ever been to China before, yet believes Chinese people are a certain way. Since he's talking this way, he's no different than toxic fans. I believe this is discrimination towards Chinese people. I really respect him as a fighter, but what he's saying is not good. The bantamweight then went on to say that if Strickland is willing to go visit China, then he would be happy to show him around the country. The way he sees things, there's good and bad in every country, and if Strickland visits China and sees the country firsthand, then maybe he'll have a different perspective. Given how active Strickland is online, expect a response from the former champ. Shocking new details on Conor McGregor's latest court case have emerged this morning after Conor appeared in court for his civil case. It's important to note that this case is civil and not criminal, although the allegations against McGregor are criminal. This is most likely from his power in Ireland, as the police chose not to prosecute Conor over this matter. Nonetheless, here are the details from court this morning. Paulo Healy, a crime correspondent for the Irish Mirror, was following the court case closely, providing updates via Twitter. He wrote, "John Gordon for the plaintiff tells the jury, this is a case which may seem complicated, but in fact is extremely simple. It's not a criminal trial. He says his client, Nikita Ni Lemhane, says she was and this case provides a route to vindication for her. Nikita is the 35-year-old hair colorist and was 29 in 2018 when the alleged incident happened. She went to a work Christmas outing. Nikita, he says, is no angel and doesn't pretend to be an angel. She was out partying hard. She had lots of drink, and she also had some. On the morning of December 9, McGregor came around to where Nikita and friend were partying and picked them up. He says, they understood they were going to another party, but in fact, they weren't going on to another party. They went to home of the second named defendant. Conor McGregor alleged to have shared it with Nikita. Nikita alleges that she told McGregor she could not have being on her period. They went to the Beacon Hotel. As far as Nikita was concerned, that evening, it could have been anywhere. Alleges McGregor beckoned Nikita into the bedroom. She does not want to have introduced with Mr. McGregor. Alleges he comes onto her as you might describe it. He actually pinned her onto the bed. She was clearly no physical match for Mr. McGregor. She will tell you she was nervous and she tried to push him off her, but she was completely unable to do so. McGregor was alleged to have prior told Nikita to suck his seed. As McGregor is alleged to have pinned her down, he's alleged to have said to her, now you know what it's like in the octagon when I went down 3 times. Nikita went home and ultimately her mother called 999 and she was taken to hospital in an ambulance. She was an absolute wreck, constantly weeping, shivering, in pain, and unable to get comfortable. In the face of this, Mr. McGregor tells you this was a consensual encounter, that they were just having fun and a bit of rough. They're pointed to defense position in the documentation, and they say Mr. McGregor claims Nikita consented to the state she ended up. He says she woke up and asked him for more. Reads part where defense says the plaintiff was enjoying herself and was moaning with pleasure, and that at no point did she express that she was unhappy. Jury shown document showing where various bruises were on Nikita. Another document is a report by a Dr. Kane, who outlines how after the alleged she was extremely upset, shaking and crying in his presence. The examination of her was frequently interrupted. First witness was called up, Dr. Daniel Kane. He confirms he was there when the plaintiff was brought there by ambulance. I first met Miss Hand in the emergency room at 9:35 a.m. on the 10th. Miss Hand was alleging she had been and he said, on my main report and also in the medical notes, I noted demeanor. I said she was shaking and crying throughout. She found it very difficult to sit due to pain. We paused the examination on numerous occasions in order for Nikita to have a break. She was very distressed. Nikita told him, I was out yesterday with my friend. I was at a hotel. I can't remember where it was. The night was very blurry. I was in the room. That's where it all happened. He had me by the neck. He stopped me from breathing a few times. I thought he was going to me. Dr. Kane says he opened a examination kit to collect DNA samples in presence of a Garda from SunDrive. He noted multiple body injuries. He noted several injuries including an abrasion to right side of jawline, neck, bruises on right arm and fingers, knuckles, left arm, back upper arm. Right buttock had 2 bruises, left buttock 3 bruises consistent with a handprint. Purple in color, right had bruise. Top of right leg there were 4 separate bruises, all purple in color. On lower leg 2 separate bruises in kneecap. On side of lower leg, another bruise, 3 separate bruises towards center. Posterior of the leg there was extensive blue and purple bruising. Dr. Kane says there were a multiplicity of bruises. In his findings, Dr. Kane said his examination was consistent with the outline of events as described by Nikita. The trial is still ongoing at the time of this writing, so we will include the thread of events in the description if you want to see the results for yourself.